Morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. I'm just going to wait a few minutes, a few seconds before we get more people in. I hope you're all okay. Hope you've had a fantastic couple of days as well. The sun has been shining, so lots of people have been out enjoying the bank holiday. It's been a fantastic time. I personally had a couple of barbecues. So if you were in today's session, could you let us know where you're from, what you're doing? That would be fantastic. And we've got a real treat for you today. So yeah, welcome to Inclusive Companies webinar. If you let before we begin today's session, I would like to take the opportunity to share with you some up and coming Inclusive Companies webinars that we're taking place throughout the next couple of weeks. So next week, we are excited to be partnering with Auto Trader to host a live in-person networking event. Live in-person networking event. That's amazing. In celebration of National Diversity Awards, shortlisted nominees and winners. The National Diversity Awards Network Extravaganza will take place next Wednesday on the 7th of June in Manchester. If we are sold out, but if you are interested, there may be a waiting list. As with all these, there is people that do drop out. So please, if you're interested in registering, that would be really good. It's all about connecting with community organizations and organizations connecting with communities and getting that kind of engagement there. On the 14th of June, our outstanding NDA winner, Lifetime Achiever, he was Dr. Tony Lloyd, will be joining us to celebrate Neurodiversity Pride Day to deliver why neurodiversity is good for business. And on the 21st of June, we'll be welcoming back two very familiar faces, which is Mark Fryer and Sue Liebert, MBE, who will be joining us to deliver a session on inclusive leadership and how we can improve cultural competence of all your people. And on the 4th of July, we'll be joined by our fantastic associate and consultant, Jason Patel, who will deliver a 60-minute workshop on new to your ED&I role, where do you start? So there's lots of people that are new to the ED&I roles, there's lots of new roles starting up. So for those that are just new, make sure you tune into that one. So some really informative events coming up over the next few weeks with some crucial topics brought to you at the forefront. So if you'd like to join us, go on the Inclusive Companies website and register. Simple as that. On today's webinar, I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by the award-winning cybersecurity consultant. It's the wonderful Lisa Ventura. During this webinar, National Diversity Awards winner will delve into the gender pay gap reporting, which we shouldn't be having gender pay gap reporting. I was talking on here before, it's not hard to pay women the same amount as men. But we'll be discussing how organizations can utilize their reports to close gaps to create equal pay for every employee. Lisa's passion with cybersecurity has led her to raise awareness about equality for women in the cybersecurity sector, which has won her countless awards. This is sure to be a jam-packed hour, and I know we are keen to hear from Lisa herself. So thank you very much, and welcome Lisa Ventura to the room.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. And I'm going to chat to you all for a while about how you can best utilise gender pay gap reports. And as Paul mentioned, gender pay gaps are something that sadly still do happen today. They do still exist, though quite frankly they really shouldn't. I absolutely believe in equity across all different sectors and different groups, etc. And I find it incredible that we're in 2023 and we're still having a lot of these conversations around the gender pay gap, and the gender pay gap still does exist. Just to give you a little bit of background to my interest in this, I've actually had first-hand experience of the gender pay gap. I was in an organisation a few years ago where I was offered £15,000 less for an equivalent head of role, and it was £15,000 less than a male counterpart in a similar role. So it definitely still does exist, and I think that there are a few things that we can do around gender gap reports and utilising them to help bring true equity into all sectors, and all organisations should look at this particular area for them. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I'm a senior cybersecurity specialist at Qualitest, and that's my day job, but I'm also the founder of Cybersecurity Unity. And this is a global content hub and community organisation that I've set up with the express aim of uniting the cybersecurity industry to try to go some small way of combating the growing cyber threat. And I'm also a writer, blogger, and speaker. Cybersecurity and cybersecurity awareness is my absolute passion. And I also do a lot of work in terms of supporting women into careers in cybersecurity, supporting those that are neurodiverse into careers in the industry. I myself am neurodiverse, diagnosed with autism a few years ago, and ADHD this year in January. And I also do a lot to support those from different backgrounds and ethnic minorities into careers in cyber. So just going to do a very quick scene setting on the gender pay gaps. So in 2017, organisations that have over 250 employees were told that by law they were required to publish information around their gender pay gaps. And this is traditionally an equality measure that calculates the difference in hourly earnings between women and men. And closing the gender pay gap has long been a consistent struggle for many years. And even though we're now in 2023, it does seem that minimum progression has been made in this area. So that was what happened in 2017, but then in 2020, here comes the pandemic, and this had a direct impact on the progression of equal gender pay, with the gap widening from 14.9% in 2020 to 15.4% in 2021. And pay gaps are often direct indicators of systematic diversity and inclusion issues within organisations. And they also often help to shine a light on areas that are in need of some improvement. Bear with me a second. So I'm going to just delve into some shocking statistics that have come to light around gender pay gaps. And according to research that was undertaken by The Guardian, women are still paid less than men at 4 out of 5 employers in the UK. And in addition to this, 4 out of 5 companies in the UK still pay their male counterparts more than their female ones. 9.4% is the median gender pay gap in 2023, which remains stubbornly wide at the same level that it was 5 years ago. And only 1 in 10 pay female and male employees equivalent wages, where the difference is 0 or less than 0.5% in either direction. So these really are some quite shocking statistics, and it does indicate that there's a much bigger problem when it comes to gender gaps that still needs to be resolved. So going to just take a short look at hitting those that are hitting the headlines for the wrong reasons. So because my sector's cybersecurity and tech, I've focused on looking at 19 of the 20 best funded UK tech companies that pay men more than women. And as you can see from the graph that I've put down here below, there were organisations like Zopa Bank, Checkout.com, Cinch, Monzo, Kazoo, Starling Bank, all names that I'm sure we've all heard the commercials. We've seen Rylan on Cinch, for example, and things like that. Octopus Energy is actually the worst in terms of this. So there's still a real stubborn problem when it comes to the gender pay gap. Oh, sorry, just go back to that one. But credit where credit is due. So there are some organisations that pay both men and women exactly the same, and some that I've had first-hand experience of are Logistics UK, which is the UK's main trade association for the logistics industry. Qualitest, where I am at the moment. So when I joined Qualitest, that was I was really open, and that was one of the first things that I asked about was could I see their gender pay gap report. And also Blue Voyant, who all look to pay both men and women equally well. And there are lots and lots of different other organisations that, credit where credit is due, they do cover the gender pay gap. But those are some that I've had firsthand experience of myself. So there are really clear signs that the gender pay gap is still real and it still exists today. And I think there are a few things that we can do to look at organisations' gender pay gap reports, and also for organisations to look at that reports and look at the data within them to see what it's telling them about their culture and their organisation. So moving on to a few things that organisations can do to utilise their gender pay gap reports to ensure equal pay for every employee, and that's regardless of gender, background, diversity, etc., and how we can look at achieving that true equality for all that is unfortunately still missing in 2023 today. So the first thing I would suggest is look at identifying the root causes of that gender pay gap within your organisation. So this can be done by analysing the data in your reports to understand where the gaps exist, because they could be across different job levels, across different departments, possibly even different locations. And once you've had a look at that data and really, sought to understand it and see where those gaps are, that's one of the first steps to looking at closing the gap. And then once you've had a look at that data and you can see clearly where those gaps exist, have a look at it setting some appropriate goals. So they should be specific and measurable, achievable, relevant and time bound. So for example, an organisation may aim to increase the number of women in senior leadership positions, or to ensure that there's equal pay for equal work across all levels of the organisation. And taking my sector, cybersecurity and tech, it also suffers from a huge problem of getting more women into it in the first place. So one of the things that I do a lot of awareness raising of is cybersecurity as a career choice for women that are looking to get into the industry. But one of the things that I found is that it does tend to be quite off-putting because of the imagery behind it. So, for example, in cybersecurity, there are a myriad of different images of people sort of with hoodies and they're hunched over their computers. And it does all look quite off-putting. And I've had a lot of feedback from women saying, this really doesn't seem to be a very friendly industry that I could look at getting into, although I do have an interest in cybersecurity and keeping people safe online. So I do a lot of work to raise awareness around that different imagery, to try and dispel a lot of the myths around cybersecurity as well that also exist in terms of the films and media A lot of people will have seen things like, Mr. Robot or the film Hackers and so on. And a lot of that will be really off-putting to people looking to get into the industry. So I do a lot of work in terms of, raising that awareness, trying to, make it as friendly as possible, and also to get around some of the myths that, although it can be, and I will hold my hands up to it, although it can be a very sort of male-dominated industry, that it is a really exciting and really vibrant industry to get into. And there are lots and lots of people, on hand. The community is amazing, and that's what's led me to set up Cybersecurity Unity. And there's a lot of people out there that are willing to be able to, help with that smooth transition into the industry. I also do a lot of work as well around, I guess the phrase sort of, calling out, but just sort of trying to draw gentle attention to organizations in terms of their webinars, their events, their online panel discussions, things like that they're doing. I still do see a lot of ones that only have men taking part in it. And again, I know that this can be really, off-putting to a lot of people that may want to come along and attend those events. So I do a lot of gentle awareness raising. I'll contact organizations and I'll say, things like, you might just want to have a look at your gender balance and things like that to try and make your organization a lot more friendly towards women looking to get into the industry, etc. And just by doing that, that can have some real positive change. So one of the goals that you might look at setting is looking at that gender disparity. It's something I'm doing a lot of work with Qualitest at the moment, whose events do tend to be very sort of male dominated, and I am doing a lot of work with them to try and bring more women into those events, and also more women from different Qualitest offices from around the globe as well. So just looking at setting those appropriate goals can have a real difference. And then following that, look at creating a strong action plan to achieve those goals. So once you've identified and analysed a lot of those root causes of a gender pay gap, developing that key action plan to address those challenges is crucial. And this plan should include things like specific strategies and initiatives that are aimed at closing that gap. So looking at all your different vacancies, looking at the language within them, and also as well ensuring that if you're advertising for a specific level of role, that the salary that you adopt is one that goes across the board, and also then cascades down into different areas of the organisation and different roles within the organisation. And then I would look at implementing some policies and best practices as well. So these will go a long way to supporting the achievement of your goals, to closing that gender pay gap. So you could perhaps look at introducing flexible working arrangements, things like perhaps unconscious bias training for managers, or mentorship programs for women to support their career progression. So as well as looking at closing that gender pay gap, also look at all those other areas and things that you could do to really attract a diverse range of people into your organisation, from all different backgrounds and from all different areas as well. I think this is so important. I can again just talk about a little bit about my own sort of personal experience. Having flexible working arrangements and being able to work fully from home really does help me a lot, because I know that from being neurodiverse and being autistic, that working in an office does not work for me at all. And I did do this for pretty much all of my career up till about 2015, which was when I made the move to working from home. And I understood then that that was why I'd struggled so much in an office environment, because I just couldn't cope with all the noise and the interruptions and the phone ringing and the different sensory aspects around that. I would try to drown a lot of that out by having some headphones or noise cancelling headphones. And then I was actually told, no, I shouldn't be wearing those headphones. So I obviously didn't know that I was autistic at the time, so it was really difficult to manage that and then manage the subsequent burnout around it. So the more that you can do to help foster an environment that really works for everybody, because there's no one size fits all for every single person within your organization. But just having those things in place can make a massive and positive difference to supporting all your employees to be able to be the very best that they can be. So I can cope with about a day or two in an office every so often if I had to, but generally I am much better at working in a remote environment when I know that I can give my best, and I know that I'm in my own space and I don't get so overloaded from a sensory point of view from different noises, interruptions, smells, etc. That I can't cope with in that environment. So really look at all those little things that you can do that will make a massive difference, and they will also go a long way to attracting a lot of people from diverse backgrounds and attracting more women into your organisations, if you can look at implementing a lot of this from the get-go. And then once you've done a lot of this work and you've got those policies in place, look at communicating your commitment to equal pay across the organisation. So if you do have more than 250 employees and you do have to produce a gender pay gap report, ensure that you cascade that down fully across your whole organisation. But even if you're a smaller organisation, so legally you're not obliged to put a gender pay gap report out, still look at communicating your commitment to equal pay across your organisation, because communication and engagement are really key to ensuring that everyone within your organisation is aware of any gender pay gap that you have, but more importantly, that the steps that you're looking at taking or that are being taken to address it. And this can be done via different internal communication channels, such as staff meetings and newsletters, as well as external communications and press releases and so on, and really get your whole team, on board with this, and fully communicate your commitment to equal pay across the organisation. And then by doing that as well, that could also potentially help when you're looking at recruiting for other roles, because your existing staff will then, I'm sure, be more than happy to promote those roles on their channels, or talk to people about how well supported and how well you've done to close the gender pay gap within your organisation. And that kind of positivity will have a knock-on effect and build a lot on your organisation's brand awareness as well. So again, I think that that's really key in terms of communicating your commitment to equal pay within your organisation and beyond it as well. And don't be afraid to have those difficult conversations if you have identified that there is a gender pay gap issue within your organisation, and that you are looking at taking some steps to address it, because Your employees will appreciate that candor, that transparency, and that honesty, and that's also really key to looking at managing this as well. So another thing that you can then look to doing is monitoring and evaluating your progress. So I would say you should regularly do that and look to see what progress that you're making towards closing any gender pay gaps that you've identified within your organisation. And look at the effectiveness of your policies and practices as well. Look at what's working and what isn't, and don't be afraid to go back to the beginning if you find that something isn't working, and you need to look at finding an alternative or some different ways of looking at doing things. You could perhaps look at conducting some employee surveys, looking to get their feedback and seeing how they're feeling about things, and if your gender pay gap, things that you're doing are working or not. And if you find that progress is slow or even a bit non-existent, perhaps look at identifying any possible reasons for this. Perhaps there are key members of your team that aren't quite as on board with trying to close the gap as they should be, and look at taking some appropriate action to address them, because it's really crucial that you look at doing that and going towards having that equal pay for all within your organisation. And then another thing is, often having a gender pay gap stems from the very top of your organisation. So look at holding leadership accountable. So they're key to being able to achieve your pay equity goals. And this can be done by tying executive compensation to pay equity outcomes, and including pay equity goals within their performance evaluations, and regularly reporting progress to the board of directors. And it's a very, very similar scenario when it comes to cybersecurity and cybersecurity awareness. Getting the whole organisation on board will often start from the very top and cascade down to all different levels of the organisation. So if everybody can see that your leadership teams and your boards are fully on board, no pun intended, with closing the gender pay gap that you have, this will surely cascade down, and all communications as well should come from leadership and from your board to clearly communicate that this is something that you are looking at, and you are looking to gain true equity from within your organisation. And as I said, I found the exact same thing for cybersecurity and cybersecurity awareness. I talk to many, many businesses that still today don't think they need to have cybersecurity or even consider it as part of their organisation, and particularly smaller businesses and SMEs. I'll often hear, we're too small to get attacked, nobody's going to bother with us, it's not something we need to think about, until they do have a data breach, or they're subjected to a phishing attack or ransomware. And by then it's obviously too late, not just from a financial perspective, but also from a reputational perspective as well. And those attacks can also cascade down their third-party supply chains, as we've seen recently in the Capita attacks. So always look at holding leadership accountable and having those key things cascade down to the rest of the organisation through key communications from your board or leadership team. So I think we've got a long way to go to achieve true equity when it comes to pay. And I have read some reports that it could even be another 50 years or so before that true equity is reached. But I think some progress is being made. I think that there are many organisations that are doing great work to address gender pay gaps within their organizations. And I think that with a lot more awareness raising and a lot more talking and being open about this key issue, more organizations will get on board with this and look at their what they're paying all their employees, across the board, and look at making appropriate changes. So what I would say is, if you spot something within your organization, don't be afraid to raise it. Go to HR, go to your leadership team, go to your board, and actually talk to them honestly and transparently about it. And I think that by doing that, and by bringing your whole organization into this, and working with them to try and get to true equity within the workplace, I think that will go a long way towards closing the gender pay gap that we do still sadly have in many organizations today. So I've put some further reading and resources in this presentation deck, and if anybody would like to have a copy of it, I'd be more than happy to share that. There's a link to a recent gender pay gap survey and the results of that on the sifted.eu website. And there's also the UK government gender pay gap service. So you can actually put your details in, your company's details into that, and see if you can get a report on how they're doing towards closing the gender pay gap. There's also the UK government's gender pay gap report for last year. Obviously this year's hasn't come out yet, but you can get 2022's report. There's some statistics around the global picture when it comes to the gender pay gap in Forbes magazine, and I put a link to that there as well. And there's also a raconteur gender pay gap report that shows how the UK's biggest employers are doing when it comes to closing their own gender pay gaps and the progress that they're making. So I'm happy to have an open discussion and any questions if you would like to pop them in the chat. And if you would like to get in touch with me, my contact details are there. And again, as I've said, I'm happy to share this presentation after it's taken place. But I'd love to find out as well how your organisation's doing when it comes to closing the gender pay gap, and if there's anything that is working for you, or anything that you've done that has made a positive difference. So please do pop your questions in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Yes, absolutely. Fantastic, in-depth presentation there, Lisa. And like you said, it's going to take 50 years in some reports that to have gender pay gaps. Something that I genuinely do not understand, because it's not hard. It's not a hard concept to pay women or African minorities the same amount as men in an organization going for the same job. Why do you think this is? Why do you think, what are the barriers for this, and why do you think this has happened, and what progress? You said there's progress being made, but in what ways?
The progress that I've seen is been around a lot of what I talked about. So those key things that organizations can do, and also working closely with their HR departments, and looking at paying the right salary for the role, regardless of background, gender equity, etc. I hate to say it, but I think many sort of smaller organizations just aren't aware of it, or aware that that there is a problem. I think the progress that is being made has definitely been in much larger organizations that have to publish their gender pay gap reports if they have more than 250 employees. So I think really a lot more work and education needs to be done with those smaller businesses, and it might be along the lines of, they may not attract enough women who may have childcare and things like that. And so that's why I said it's really important to look at, there's no one size fits all, approach, and putting those things like, flexible working, remote or home working and so on in place. I don't have children, but I cannot work in an office. So, as I said, there's no one size fits all approach to this. So, really looking at putting all those different, things in place. Perhaps having, staggered start and finish times, if you have to have, people in the office as well, that would help with childcare or collecting children from school. Also, another area I've been involved in is I've been a carer as well, and I've had to juggle work and so on around prioritizing caring for my dad who was in ill health. So it's not just about the childcare, it's about having those flexible things in place that will help people regardless of what situations they also find themselves in.
We've got a question from Jennifer Watson. Before Anne goes to that question, I will come back to it. Because I always think the intersectionality of pay gaps is really crucial as well. So, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, we're doing a bit of research with Auto Trader onto ethnicity pay gap, and that's far worse than the gender pay gap.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about, ethnic minority women in organizations, again, you break that down, it's a lot further down the scale.
Yeah.
So maybe, with some white British males, females, should I say. So, I think it's important that we have the intersectionality of pay gaps. And another thing that I think is really important myself, which I've seen in some organizations do, is they'll have maybe a director of HR kind of job that's coming up. That was the male previously. And then all of a sudden, if a woman gets it, it's the head of HR, which then comes with a lesser pay gap. So how do you counteract that? How do you counteract that? Because it's a different role, but it's the same role, but named differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen a lot of that take place as well. Like you say, when somebody leaves and then they change the role from director to to the head of, etc. And as I said, I've been in that situation as well, pretty much. So I think just get clear about the roles that you have and the pay that's commensurate with those roles and with those titles from the start, and look at what the best practices and the different pay levels for those different roles, and get that advice and in place from the very start. And I get that organizations will probably try and look at those kind of loopholes, the cost of living, the cost of everything, etc. They need to streamline. Tech and cyber at the moment has also been subject to a lot of layoffs, redundancies, job losses, job cuts, etc., which I think is only compounding the problem as well. So really get clear from the outside as to what level of roles you've got, what the titles are, and what the salaries are that are commensurate with those roles and titles. And they should go across the board. We should not be having these conversations in 2023. And I'm really, really sad that we are. But again, awareness as well, awareness of this, and making sure that everyone, every level within your organization is on board with this.
Yeah, and I do implore anybody that's on this webinar today, please put a question in there. Lisa will answer this for you, because I know some people on here may struggle, may want some answers to how they can report within the organization, how they can improve. And that goes on to Jennifer Watson's. I hope you're okay today, Jennifer. Do you know what organizations are excelling in this space that we can look at in terms of having the largest reduction in their pay gap, in their gender pay gaps? I can certainly look on myself as well. I might get back to you on that and come back with a separate answer. But do you have any answers to that, Jennifer?
Yeah. Absolutely. So I do a lot of research into this area, and I've seen, a lot of the much bigger organizations in different industries do tend to do a lot better and always publish their gender pay gaps. I can't sort of think of any specific names at the moment, but certainly a lot of the big ones I've seen, like Asda, for example, I know do really well with their gender pay gap. Logistics UK that I mentioned earlier do very well. As does actually the organisation I'm currently working for. I mean, we've got thousands of people working in different locations all over the world, not just here in the UK. And Qualitest, I have to say, does incredibly well and publishes their gender pay gap. And I'm not just banging the drum because I'm working for them. It's a genuine thing of, I'm there with them at the moment, and I can see firsthand what they do and the best practices. And we had a communication out from the managing director and CEO last week, just talking about this in general and keeping us updated on what they're doing to ensure full equity across Qualitest, not just here in the UK but all over the world. One thing I will say, Jennifer, is have a look at. I'm happy to send this presentation afterwards to you, but do have a look at the UK government gender pay gap service, because that will give you some really good insights into different organisations that are doing really well in this area. So definitely go and have a look at that. It's the second link down on the slide that you can see at the moment.
Yeah, I also know some in the inclusive top 50 that are doing really good space. They have to be in the top 10. So like Bupa, Capgemini, West Midlands Fire and Rescue, they're all doing some amazing work within that. And they don't just concentrate on just one pay gap as well. So quite often they concentrate on the disability pay gap or the ethnicity pay gap as well. They kind of, what's the word? My mind's gone completely blank. They come up that what they do and they publish, that's the word, their ethnicity and gender pay gaps as well. So there's some great organizations that are doing some fantastic space, some fantastic stuff in this space. But I do agree with you, some medium and small organizations could do a little bit better, and a lot more awareness needs to get out there as well. So do you think there's a correlation? I kind of touched upon it between ethnicity pay gap and gender pay gap, and is there any kind of things that you can do to merge the two?
I mean, I think it should be across the board, and rather than sort of calling it a gender pay gap, it should be a pay equity. So there's true equity across all different areas, backgrounds, ethnicity, etc., all of them, and it should. And I would love to see it being the equity pay gap, so it's true equity for all, as opposed to just focusing on one different demographic, so to speak. So that's actually, funnily enough, something I'm going to be doing a lot of awareness raising with through Cybersecurity Unity. Now, granted, this is going to be very much around the cybersecurity and tech industry, because that's my sort of background in industry. But I'm hoping that by doing that, other sectors and other industries will be able to, see a lot of the work that we're doing. And I'm actually going to, call it the equity gap. So it's not just about women in tech and cyber and paying them equally. It's about everyone in all different demographics. So watch this space on that, because that's something I'm definitely going to be looking at doing.
That's something I'm really passionate about. Something I'm harping on about this year is equity, because last year we did so many events. We did across the UK live ones, and I spoke to, for the first time, I did see a lot more ethnic minorities, a lot of people, more diverse people in senior positions, a lot more women. But there was a kind of a story to tell after that, and it was like, well, I've got the position, but actually I'm being left out of the conversation. Actually, I'm not getting the piece of work that my other directors are getting at, or am I just the token person there for the data set and so on and so forth? And I hear that quite a lot. So equity and equity pay gaps and equity across the board needs to happen. It's not just about promoting people into the senior positions, looking good for your stats. We've got a question from Anna Pendlebury. So she said, in a male-dominated industry such as construction, large companies like Constain are publishing pay gap reports and have clear initiatives and are signatures to large-scale pledges. But how can these companies take it on the top level, from the top level, drives are marketable into addressing unconscious and conscious biases throughout their workforce? The attitude and stereotypes can desensitive women getting into the industry, regardless of the policies and initiatives of the company as a whole.
Absolutely. So, Anna, you mentioned construction, and I do know that you have similar challenges to what we have in cybersecurity and tech, as does the logistics industry and many other industries as well. And as I mentioned, I think the board need to be on board, for want of a phrase, and really communicate those those pledges and those initiatives and things that organizations are doing. And I do find that if it comes from the top, it will cascade down a lot better towards the stuff. And I think everybody should have unconscious bias training. I think that should happen across the whole organization, and it should be part of an onboarding process. So I think every organization should have their own training around that, and have that as part of onboarding, and regular update training as well. I think that's really, really important. And that's something I'm doing a lot of awareness raising with, in terms of trying to eliminate a lot of that unconscious bias, and particularly when it comes to hiring as well. And as Paul mentioned, looking at those different role levels, and so you don't go from director to head of when somebody leaves, and things like that. So bringing that training in from the top, having it cascade down, and having regular update training is really, really important. And I've had conversations with lots of different organizations, again, not to Qualitas, but I'm actually working with them to implement some training on unconscious bias and so on within their onboarding program as well. So I think don't be afraid to have those conversations with your board, or with leadership, and with your team. I was nervous about it, but I approached, and now I'm seeing some tangible results, and just having those those conversations that might be a bit uncomfortable to start with, but it's paying off dividends. Now we're looking at implementing those things within the organization.
I think sensitizing, I can't say that word today, women into the industries, but I think we need more women in these industries. So I would employ any woman that's interested in getting to them industries, go for it, and and have a word with the senior leaders. And sometimes I think when you approach them in certain ways, more in an emotional way as well, for instance, if they have children, they might have a daughter, would they like their daughter to pay less than what you are, and so on and so forth, and what can we do about it? And and get that, it's almost like you're putting a seed into their brain. Oh yeah, it's your idea, but actually it was your idea, but actually that can create change as well and work with you. Do you know what I mean? And I think that those are the types of conversations that, be brave in having them conversations with the leaders. It's not an easy thing, but be brave, and actually change can happen if you approach it in the right way.
Absolutely. And I have a phrase as well. I'm a huge fan of Queen and Freddie Mercury and sing Bohemian Rhapsody I don't know how many times, and there's a key phrase that's used in that: fortune favors the bold. And it can be difficult having those conversations and approaching people about it, but it really can pay dividends as well, and that awareness raising part of it. So don't be afraid to have those conversations and speak to senior leaders about this.
And I think one of the things, sorry, these says, when we talk about networks, I always harp on the power of networks, especially in large organizations. You have a collective voice, and you have discussions around gender pay gaps or whatever other issues that may be, and present that to the board, and ask them, what actions are you going to take from the research that we've done as a network? Do you know what I mean? And what's the plan and the timescales of this happening? Because you need to be doing stuff, because this is how your staff feel. I think networks is so powerful, but you need to get the leaders involved as well, and the leaders involved with the networks too, and change can actually happen there as well. So I think we've more or less run out of time. Lisa, any last words before we go?
I think just, as I've said, don't be afraid to have those difficult discussions, and call it out if you see it. It is difficult, but it can really pay off. And that's not just around the gender pay gap. Anything that's not displaying true equity that you notice within your organization, definitely look at raising it. And let's carry on trying to make some progress with this, because as I said, we really shouldn't be having these conversations in 2023, but we are. So let's work to raise as much awareness around this as possible, and look towards trying to achieve, true equity, in the future. I'd love to see that.
So once again, because I think you're absolutely amazing, Lisa, genuinely. So, how can people, add Lisa Ventura on LinkedIn? I suppose you're on LinkedIn. Make sure you connect with her. If you need any more information about gender pay gaps, please get in contact with Lisa, because she's not just talking about it. She's really, really, really passionate about it. And when you have someone that's passionate about it, then they can come into your organization and actually make a huge difference. So, that's what I've got to say about that. But any final words?
I've put my contact details on the screen, so by all means do get in touch with me. I can be found across the main social media channels. My websites are below, lisaventura.co.uk, and my email address is above as well, lisa@csu.org.uk. By all means get in touch. I'm always happy to answer questions or talk to anybody, not just about this, but any other key topics or trends within our industry.
Thank you. And this will be played on our on-demand inclusive companies membership as well. So we'll have many organizations that'll be watching this afterwards. So welcome to you as well if you're watching this on the on-demand kind of system. So just before we go, I'd just like to remind you again, on the 14th of June, we've got Tony Lloyd talking about neurodiversity is good for business. On the 21st of June, we've got a session on inclusive leadership and how you can improve cultural competence for your people. And also, and the 4th of July, if you're new to an E&D&I role, where to start. So if anybody in your organization that's new to the role and need a little fresh up on what to do and how they can improve as a professional, please go into that one as well. That's on the 4th of July. But on behalf of myself and Lisa, I just want to thank Lisa again for a fantastic presentation. I hope to see you all soon. And thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you.